Thank you so much for your incredible support on this channel, your enthusiasm for our stories, and your likes, comments, and shares. To us, your engagement with our videos motivates us to bring you even more. May your life be filled with more passionate and emotional love stories. With endless love, happiness, and success, may you always be surrounded by people who truly care for you, and may your dreams turn into reality if you're facing any challenges. I pray that peace and strength fill your heart and that brighter days are just ahead for you. Stay blessed always. Where are you watching from? We would love to know. Drop your country, city, or even your cozy little spot at home in the comments below. Let's make this community even more connected. Tell us in the comments. Which scene in today's story most moved you? Your thoughts are what make these stories. What was your favorite part? Even more exceptional is your subscription to the If You Enjoy These Stories. Share the video with your friends and subscribe to the channel. Let's spread the love and romance together. Now sit back, relax, and let's dive into today's beautiful love story. The skyline was illuminated by the city lights, which sparkled like diamonds. It was a night full of golden light over the bustling nightlife. Music, laughter, and the scent of expensive cologne, mixed with the faint sweetness of Stella, sat with her friends and enjoyed cocktails at an elegant bar with her brown skin. She laughed, unaware that tonight was about to begin, her curls cascading over her shoulders and glowing under the dim lights. Stella had always been to change the course of her destiny forever at the age of 22. Careful, responsible, and collected, but she had given herself a rare night off this evening. She had been persuaded to indulge by her friends, and as the drinks came in, so did her inhibitions. She wasn't the kind to drink much, but after a few cocktails, she felt light, free, and exhilarated. The music pulsed through her veins and she swayed to the rhythm, her heart pounding with excitement. Her deep brown eyes shimmered with mischief as she giggled, enjoying the warmth of the moment, unaware that fate had placed someone in her path who would claim her heart in the most unexpected way on the other side of the bar. Albert leaned against the counter, his piercing gaze scanning the crowd with quiet amusement. He was a powerful man at the age of 30, a billionaire tycoon whose name alone could shush the corporate world. But here in the middle of a crowd that had no idea who he was, he felt invisible, and for once he liked it. His tailored suit was impeccable, his broad shoulders exuding confidence and authority. But tonight he wasn't interested in business meetings or investments. He had stepped into this bar simply to escape the suffocating pressure of his life. And he had no idea that destiny had brought him here for something far greater than he could ever expect that. When he saw Stella laughing and swaying and glowing like a goddess among mortals because of her hypnotic quality and his usual detachedness, crumbled when he focused on her brown skin and soft, full lips, shimmered under the lights the way her eyes held a fire he had never seen before. His heartbeat quickened, a strange sensation overtaking him. Who was she, and why did he feel? And Stella felt an uncontrollable pull toward her, a surge of drunken boldness. Spun around, bumping into a firm chest, strong hands steadied her, and as the world tilted, her breath hitched, and she saw the most intense pair of blue eyes she had ever seen. She tilted her head up. The stranger was devastatingly handsome, his chiseled jaw sharp enough to cut glass, his presence exuding an air of raw dominance. Albert felt the shock of the moment as his grip on her waist began to slightly tighten. Vanilla and something intoxicatingly sweet, making his pulse race. Stella in her drunken haze giggled softly. "Oops." "Sorry," she murmured, her lips parting. Albert smirked slightly, his voice velvety and deep. "Are you always this reckless?" he asked. "Or is tonight special?" She blinked up at him, her lips curling into a teasing. She said, "Your smile tonight is magical." The way her body reacted to this stranger's presence surprised even her, and she did so without thinking. After some hesitation, she pressed her lips to his and closed the small gap between them. The electric kiss was an unexpected collision of two souls unlike any other. Albert froze for a moment as the two men who had previously met seemed destined to cross paths. Of a second, his mind short-circuiting, then, as if instinct took over, he pulled her closer, deepening the kiss. Her lips were soft, warm, and dangerously as he savored the nebulous sweetness. His throat gave out an addictive low groan. Stella moaned softly as she melted into her drink, which had something special about it. Her fingers gripping his jacket as if anchoring herself, heat rushed through her veins, and for the first time in her life, she felt utterly consumed by a moment she couldn't control the world around them, blurred into insignificance. There was only him. Only. This kiss Albert, a man who never lost control, found himself drowning in the sensation of her lips. His fingers traced the curve of her waist, his body responding to her in a way that terrified and thrilled him. At the same time, she was unlike anyone he had ever met. Fearless, uninhibited, and utterly intoxicating after what felt like eternity. They broke apart breathless, their foreheads touching. Stella giggled, her cheeks flushed. "Wow, that was dangerous," Albert finished for her, his voice husky with desire. Stella laughed, not realizing the weight of what she had just done to her. He was just a stranger, a dangerously attractive one. But nothing more. She had no idea that she had just captured the obsession of one of the most powerful men in the world. Albert, however, knew it. He knew deep in his gut that this wasn't just a random encounter. He wanted more, needed more. He wasn't the type to chase women, but with Stella he could already feel the addiction setting in before he could say anything. Her friends called her Stella. "Come on, we're leaving." She turned, her lips still tingling from the kiss, and glanced back at him. "Goodbye, stranger," she said playfully, before disappearing into the crowd. Albert stood frozen, watching her leave, his jaw clenching. Goodbye. Oh no, this wasn't goodbye. Not even close, as she vanished into the night. Albert silently pledged that he would find her no matter what, because kiss wasn't enough. One taste of her lips had ignited something dangerous inside him, something that could not be ignored. Stella was unaware of the significance of her life, had just been forever altered when she kissed a stranger, but that stranger was billionaire CEO Albert Kingston, and now he was obsessed with her, and Albert, he would stop at nothing to make her his. The city was still buzzing with nightlife, but for Albert Kingston, the world had narrowed down to one singular thought: she was Stella. And the name stuck to him like an insatiable addiction. And no matter how much he tried to compose himself, the taste of her lips still lingered, igniting something he was powerless within. And as he sat in the back of his sleek black limousine, his jaw dropped, clenched his fingers, tapping impatiently against the leather seat. His personal assistant, Richard, sat across from him, his eyes flicking over the tablet as he spoke about business deals, mergers, and stock prices. But Albert wasn't listening. He couldn't. His mind was still caught in the moment when that beautiful brown-skinned woman had stumbled into his arms and kissed him with reckless abandon, the sensation of her soft lips, the intoxicating warmth of her breath, and the way her body had pressed so perfectly against his. It had set a fire inside him that refused to be extinguished. Richard finally noticed the silence and hesitated before speaking. "Sir, are you all right?" Albert's icy blue eyes snapped to him, and for the first time in 380 years, there was an unfamiliar gleam in them. It wasn't business, it wasn't power, it was. "Find her something much more pressing," he ordered, his voice low but imbued with unquestionable authority. Richard blinked in surprise. "Sir, the woman from the bar." Albert's tone was sharper now, unwavering. "I need to know everything about her, her name, where she lives, what she does. And I don't care what it takes to find her." Richard swallowed the company for which he had worked. Albert for years, and never not once had he seen his boss show even a shred of interest in a woman. Women chased him, threw themselves at him, begged for his attention, but Albert never cared. He never even looked at them. And now he was directing a comprehensive investigation into a bar girl. "I'll get started right away, sir." Albert leaned back against the seat with his fingers running, Richard said, nodding. He was a man who thrived on control through his thick dark hair, calculated actions. But the events of tonight, that kissing wasn't planned, and it wasn't part of a business deal or a scripted interaction. It had been raw, electric, real, and that scared him more than anything else, because he was now craving something over which he had no control. Meanwhile, Stella lay in bed, her head spinning, her lips still tingling from the kiss she had shared with the mysterious stranger. She groaned, rolling onto her side, attempting to escape the burning heat beneath her skin. She had never done anything comparable in her entire life. Been so reckless, so impulsive, but for some reason with him, it had felt right. Her fingers traced her lips absent-mindedly as flashes of his intense blue eyes entered her thoughts, and Stella mumbled to herself, shaking. Get a grip, Stella. Her head, she didn't even know him. She had no idea who he was, what he did. Even his name, he was just a stranger. A ridiculously handsome, breathtakingly intense stranger, but still a stranger. And yet her heart was still racing as if it knew something. She grabbed her phone, scrolling. When a notification from her bank appeared while she was mindlessly scrolling through her messages, her eyes widened in panic and she clicked on. She barely had enough money to cover her rent, which was due in 3 days, damn it. She whispered, biting her lip. Life hadn't been easy for her work, multiple jobs struggling to make ends meet. It was exhausting, but she refused to give up. She didn't have anyone to rely on, and she definitely wouldn't. Start now, little did she know her life was about to change in ways she never expected. The next morning, Albert stood in his penthouse staring out at the city. His thoughts were racing, and he was overwhelmed with thoughts of Stella's gaze and the way she felt in his arms. He needed to see her again, but his phone buzzed, and he immediately answered. Tell me you found. It wasn't just a need, it was an obsession. Richard cleared his throat as he spoke of her, his voice sharp with impatience. Her name is Stella Brooks, 22 years old. Works 2 jobs, one at a cafe downtown, and a third at a bookstore, lives in a small city apartment. Albert gripped the phone tightly. Stella, he said her name as if it were a secret he wanted to keep to himself. Send me her address, he ordered. Richard hesitated. Sir, are you sure you want to? Albert cut him off. I don't just want to. I have to. And just like that. The hunt began. Stella rushed through her shift at the cafe, balancing trays, taking orders, trying to ignore the exhaustion settling. She had barely slept in her bones, her mind filled with fantasies about the stranger. After giving Stella a kiss, she asked her coworker to call her, and she grabbed the tray, and making her way to the table, she stopped when she saw him and froze. Albert sat there dressed in a crisp black suit, his piercing blue eyes locked onto her like a predator sizing up its prey's chiseled features, and sharp features made him even more stunning in the daylight. And his presence seized her heart. Slammed into her ribs, she whispered to Albert, who smirked and fixed a dark gaze on her. With something she couldn't quite place, Stella caught her breath once more. He leaned forward, his voice threatening, and asked, Hitched, how do you know my name? Whisper, I know a lot of things about you. Now a shiver ran down her spine. She should have been afraid and fled, but instead she stood there frozen and caught in Albert's gaze. His head studying her. You left that night without saying goodbye. Her lips parted. I didn't think I had his jaw clenched. You have no idea what you've done to me, Stella, he said. Her pulse was quick. Accelerated. What do you mean? Albert's eyes became darker, and his voice became a possessive growl. One kiss was insufficient, so I now want to more. Stella felt her entire body tense as Albert's words settled between them, thick with an intensity she wasn't prepared for. One kiss wasn't enough, and now I want more. Her breath hitched, and for a moment she felt as though the entire world had narrowed down to just the two of them, the cafe fading into a distant blur. She swallowed hard, gripping the tray, and in her hands as if it were the only thing keeping her grounded. I don't even know you, she finally managed to say, though her voice was weaker than she had intended. Albert laughed, his eyes filled with amusement. Laced with something deeper, something more possessive. Then let's change that, he said without a hitch, leaning back in his chair as if he had all the time in the world, and sat down next to Stella with her stomach in her hands. Twisted the way he said her name, it was like he was claiming it, claiming her, and it was impossible to think because he was looking at her as though he were already undressing her. Straightforwardly, she shouldn't. She should leave and act like that night. Never happened, but something in her hesitated. Something in her wanted to know more. I'm curious about this perilously attractive stranger who had awakened something within her that she had never experienced before. Trying to regain self-control, she finally said. Albert's eyes darkened slightly, but then he reached into his pocket, pulling out his sleek black wallet without a word. He slid out a few crisp $100 bills on the table for your consideration, and he said, his voice low, inviting, but undeniably commanding. Stella's eyes widened. I'm not. Before she could say anything that would make the situation worse, she stopped herself. His smirk only got bigger. I never said you were, he murmured, tilting his head. But you work hard, don't you? 2 jobs, late nights, exhaustion written all over your face. His eyes flicked to the faint shadows beneath her eyes, and for the first time she saw something in his gaze that wasn't just desire, concern. She swallowed, staring at the money. Was tempting for a long time, but she wasn't the kind of girl who accepted handouts from God. Mysterious men, regardless of how wealthy or dangerously attractive they were. I cannot. She concluded by redirecting the funds toward him. I don't take money for doing nothing. Albert studied her for a long moment, something unreadable flickering. His expression changed, and then, to her surprise, he said nothing. Chuckle. You're different, he mused almost to himself. Stella crossed her arms, different from what. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table, his piercing gaze locking onto hers with an intensity that made her breath. Unlike every other woman I've met, he simply asked, do you know how? Many women would have taken that money without a second thought. She raised an eyebrow. And you expected me to? His smirk returned, but there was something softer beneath it now. No, he admitted, I was testing you. Stella let out a sharp exhale while shaking her head. Yes, you did. And Albert's eyes sparkled. Did an odd silence extend between them, its weight pressing against one another? Stella's chest, she didn't know what it was about this man, but he had a way of making her feel as if she were teetering on the brink of something perilous, for which she wasn't entirely prepared for. I must return to work, she stated, finally stepping away. Albert didn't stop her this time. He simply watched her go, his gaze never leaving her until she disappeared behind the counter. And as she walked away, she couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't the last time she would see him. Albert sat in his car later that evening, staring out at the city skyline, his thoughts completely consumed by her Stella Brooks. She had gotten under his skin in a way no woman ever had before. He had created an empire from nothing, and it was making him insane. He controlled everything, making him one of the world's most powerful men. Despite this, he answered without looking at the caller ID, because his phone buzzed and Sir Richard's voice came through. Albert exhaled, unsure whether you got what you wanted. Slowly but surely, Richard pondered the next move, and Albert's fingers tightened around his phone with a deliberate, slow smile. The next step was making her his the following day. Stella was exhausted. She had barely slept, her mind replaying the interaction with Albert over and over again. She had thought she would never see him again. However, the manner in which he had appeared to want more from her indicated to her. Otherwise, as she moved to her second, she shook her head in an effort to concentrate. Job at the bookstore. But the moment she entered, she froze. Albert Kingston was casually perusing the shelves as if he were there. Had every right to be there. Her heart slammed against her ribs. You've got to be kidding me, she muttered. He looked up at the sound of her voice, and a slow, predatory smile spread across his lips. Hello, Stella. Her fists are clenched. Are you following me? Albert chuckled and moved closer, his presence being so overwhelming. Would it scare you if I said yes? She asked, hard swallowing. Maybe he reached out with care, tucking a stray hair behind her ear. His fingers just grazed her skin enough to send a shiver down her spine. Then what if I told you I'm just a man who knows what he wants? Albert to catch her breath. And what do you want? His eyes got darker, and his voice became a possessive whisper. You. Stella's heart pounded. She knew she should push him away, should tell him he was insane, that they barely knew each other. But the way he was looking at her, the raw intensity in his voice, it was making it harder and harder to resist. Albert murmured, Yes, Stella, as he leaned his lips just inches from hers. Let me take you out and show you what it's like to be in a relationship with a man who will give you everything. Stella's entire body was engulfed in fear, longing, and a dangerously close call to surrender. Stella's entire body tightened as she knew that that moment would change her life forever. Let me take you out and show you what it's like to be, at Albert's words, with a man who will give you everything. The weight of his gaze and the unadulterated ferocity in his voice sent chills down my spine. Down her spine, making it impossible to look away. She should say no. She should explain to him that she was not interested, because the entire circumstance was too much for her. Quickly, but she was frozen in place because of the way he was looking at her, as if she were the only thing that mattered. As she struggled to find the right words, she started, but her breath hitched, her lips parted slightly. Albert leaned in closer, his scent being something dark and pricey, intoxicating, filling her senses. "You feel it too, don't you?" he murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. "This pull between us, it's undeniable, Stella." Her chest tightened. She did experience the perilous magnetic pull that appeared to draw her to him, but matter how much she wanted to resist, but that didn't mean she should give in to it. She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. "Albert, we don't even know each other." She finally managed to say, her voice firmer this time. "You don't know anything about me." His slow smile, knowing that's where you're wrong. He said smoothly, "I know more than you think." Stella's eyebrows furrowed in confusion. He slightly shifted his gaze. "Never leaving her side, I know you have 2 jobs to make ends meet," he said, voice laced with something that almost sounded like admiration. "I know you're independent, strong-willed, and that you don't let people pressure you. I know you didn't take my money yesterday because you have something that most people don't. Don't pride." He moved closer, rubbing her wrist with his fingers, sending her into a frenzy of heat. "And I know," he added his own, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper, "that you're trying to convince yourself that you don't want this, when every part of you is telling without you." Stella took a deep breath. So how did he see through her? Easily. How did he know exactly what she was thinking, when even she wasn't sure? She shook her head, trying to clear the fog of his presence. "I don't," she started, but Albert cut her off. "Don't lie to me, Stella." He murmured, his fingers trailing up her arm in a slow, deliberate touch that left her skin tingling. "I can see it in your eyes. You want to say yes." She choked hard, realizing that he was right. Did want to say yes because she was curious about the direction this attraction would take. However, she was afraid of how quickly this was moving, the intensity of his attention and his ease. Albert must have detected her hesitation because she seemed to be unraveling. He said this in a softer voice as he sighed and stepped back just enough to give her room. "Time, I won't force you, but I won't go anywhere." Stella, his gaze was fixed on hers, was brimming with a promise that made her heart race. "I'm a patient man when I need to be, and I know you'll come to me sooner or later." Before she could respond, he turned and left her. Standing there breathless and shaken for the rest of the day, Stella couldn't focus. Whenever she tried to forget about Albert, his words came back to her, wrapping themselves around her like an invisible chain. "I'm not going anywhere." By the time she got home that night, she was utterly exhausted physically. Mentally and emotionally, she heavily exhaled as she threw herself onto her bed and looked up at the ceiling. What the hell was she supposed to do now? A part of her wanted to ignore Albert completely, to pretend like he had never walked into her life. But another part of her, the part that still felt his touch and replayed his words, was still there. She groaned with frustration as she repeatedly recognized that was impossible. Turned onto her side, willing herself to sleep, but sleep didn't come easily. Instead, when she awoke, she remembered his touch, his voice, and the way he had looked at her, as if she belonged to him. The next morning, her pulse was racing, her body aching in a way she didn't quite understand. Days passed, and despite Albert's promise, he didn't show up again at first. Stella was. She felt relieved and told herself that it was good that she needed time to think. But as the days turned into a week, she found herself looking over her shoulder, wondering if he would appear. And when he didn't, an unsettling disappointment settled in her chest. Had he given up? The thought sent an unexpected pang through her. She didn't want to admit it, but a part of her had gotten used to the idea of him being there, of his intense gaze following her, of his presence lingering even when he wasn't around. So when her shift at the bookstore ended late one night and she stepped outside to find a sleek black car parked at the curb, her heart nearly stopped. Albert was leaning against it, looking completely at ease as if he had been waiting for her. All along her breath caught Albert. His lips curved into a slow smirk. "Miss me," she crossed her arms, trying to ignore the way her pulse quickened. "You're unbelievable," she muttered. "You said you wouldn't push." "I'm not," he said simply. "I'm just waiting." He gestured to the car. "Come, let me drive you home." Stella hesitated. She shouldn't, but standing there staring at him under the glow of the streetlights, something in her cracked. For once she wanted to say yes, and so without another word, she stepped forward, allowing Albert to open the door for her as the car pulled away from the curb. She couldn't shake the feeling that she had just crossed a line she could never go back from, and deep down she wasn't sure she wanted to. The car ride was suffocatingly silent, the air between them thick with unspoken words, and a tension so potent that Stella could feel it pressing against her skin. Albert sat beside her, his presence overwhelming, his gaze lingering on her profile as she stared out the window, trying to ignore the erratic. She could hear the engine's soft hum, and the occasional flicker of the car's shadow cast by streetlights did little to calm the raging storm. Inside her, she knew she had crossed a boundary the moment she had stepped into this vehicle, but she couldn't bring herself to regret it for some reason. Albert had a way of making her feel as if she hated how much she was perilously close to something thrilling yet dangerous. Since she entered, he had not spoken much, but his silence spoke louder than any words. He was drawn to him. Every slight movement, every deep inhale of breath, she could feel him analyzing her reading, her constant waiting when they finally reached her apartment complex. Albert didn't kill the engine right away. Instead, he turned in his seat, his piercing gaze burning into her. "Do you regret getting in?" Stella swallowed hard, gripping the strap of her purse tighter. "No," Albert grinned, as if he had anticipated that response, and murmured his admission, barely audible. "Velvety, smooth, because this won't be the last time, Stella." She turned to him, confusion clouding her features. "What do you mean?" He leaned in slightly, his fingers ghosting over her hand, igniting a spark that shot straight through her veins. "I mean, you can try to fight it. Pretend that what happened between us was nothing but a drunken mistake," he said, his voice dripping with certainty. "But you know deep down that it wasn't, and you also know that this isn't the end of us. Her." Breath hitched Albert. His name left her lips like a plead. But she wasn't sure if it was for clarity's distance or more of the enticing energy that crackled. Between them, Albert chuckled low and knowing, "I'll let you go for now," he said, his voice softer this time. "But this is just the beginning." Stella, as you can see, wasn't sure why, but his words made her feel excited. She stepped out of the car with a shiver coursing down her spine as she opened the door. Didn't look back, afraid that if she did, she would find herself sinking even deeper into whatever this was. But even as she made her way up to her apartment, her body still tingling from his touch, she knew the truth. She was already sinking for the next few days. Stella made an effort to maintain her usual focus on her life, immersed herself in work, ignored the whispers of doubt and longing that haunted her, and convinced herself that, in her otherwise routine world, Albert was nothing more than a fleeting moment. However, she should have known better, because Albert was not ignored. It began with insignificant things like a large bouquet of roses showing up at the only sign on the bookstore where she worked was an A. A sleek black car was parked late at night outside her apartment complex, as if watching expensive dresses be delivered by an unknown individual. Perfumes, jewelry, and other items that she never accepted, but that made her heart race knowing that he was behind them. And then Albert began the text. "You continue to act as if you don't care about me," she never replied, but that did not stop him. "Albert's disregard for me will not alter anything, Stella. You are already mine. You just haven't admitted it yet." Her hands would shake as she deleted his messages, but the worst part was that they stuck with her long after she had finished reading them. Tried to push them away, but as she closed up one evening, he got worse. She stepped out into the bookstore exhausted, her shoulders heavy. She froze in the dimly lit parking lot when she saw a familiar figure leaning against a posh car that was waiting for her. Albert's breath got stuck in her throat. He smirked as she whispered, her pulse pounding, before confidently exiting the vehicle. "Flip took you long enough," He mused, his hands sliding into his pockets as he took slow, deliberate steps toward her. She forced herself to remain firm. "What are you doing here, Albert?" Tilted his head, amusement flickering in his dark eyes. "Stella, I told you," he said in a smooth, deadly voice. "I don't give up easily, and I always get what I want." Her heart pounded. "And what is it that you want?" He stopped directly in front of her, so close that she could feel the heat of his body and feel the sheer power in him. Hand reached up, fingers lightly tracing her jawline, sending a shiver down her spine. "You," he murmured in a low, intimate voice that nearly brought her to her knees. "Gave out. I want you." Stella's breath hitched. She should push him away. She should inform him that this was not going to work, and that whatever conflict had arisen between them needed to be put out before it took them both. But she didn't, because she knew the truth. She wanted him too, more than she had ever wanted anything in her. Because of his smirk, Life Albert must have recognized the conflict raging within her. Softened into something more dangerous? Something possessive. "Stop fighting it." "Stella," he murmured as he brushed her bottom lip, making her tremble. "You already know you do," he said. She sucked hard, and her entire body betrayed her by desperately wanting more of him. Before she could finish, her voice broke, and Albert leaned in to kiss her lips, ghosting over her, mocking and taunting, waiting for her to get closer. And she did so while taking a deep, shaky breath as their lips met in a kiss. That was inevitable, and Albert growled at her slowly. Mouth as he pulled her against him, with his arms around her waist as if he were starving, she melted. Into him, her heart beating so violently as her fingers pressed into his shirt. She was certain he could feel it, and everything she had been trying to hide fell apart before Ash, because was no longer fighting, no longer pretending, and no longer running after Albert caught her. She had no desire to flee. As soon as Stella parted from Albert's reality, it came crashing down, a tidal wave. But the fire ignited within her refused to be drowned. Her breathing, as she tried to process what had happened, she was erratic, her chest rising and falling quickly. It just so happened that she had told herself she would resist him and not give in, into his world's trap. But she was still pressing her lips against him here. Albert held her in his hands, tingling from his devastating kiss. As he studied her, his grip on her waist remained firm, possessive, and protective. His dark eyes sucking her in like a man who was addicted to something he knew he would never be able to get enough of. "You, don't you feel it too?" Was low and rough with the desire to inform Stella that she was not the only one. The way he said her name, but she forced herself to break away from his embrace. The cold air wrapped around her, instantly making her realize just how warm his body had been against hers. She needed to think, to breathe, to understand what she was getting into. "This is insane," she murmured, her head cocked. "We come from two completely different worlds. You're a billionaire CEO," and I hesitated, feeling a lump form in her throat. I'm just an ordinary girl, Ed." Albert's resentment at the way she denigrated herself was so strong. "There was nothing ordinary about you, Stella." He moved closer, his voice unwavering. "Most extraordinary woman I've ever met, and I don't care where you come from. I want—" She was shaken by his words because she had never been wanted like this before. Not just for a fleeting moment, not just for one night, but completely. Albert wanted all of her, and that frightened her, Albert, and she exhaled. Shakily, "What do you want from me?" His gaze darkened, his hand reaching out to tuck a loose strand of hair behind her ear. The touch was so tender, so unlike the ruthless businessman the world knew him to be. "I want everything," he confessed his. "I want your time, your laughter, your stubbornness, and your fire, voice roar. I want to know how you sound when you say my name with love, and how you look first thing in the morning. Of hesitation, I want to make you mine, Stella." Her heart thundered violently against her rib cage. "This is crazy, then let's be crazy together." With a slight grin on his face, Albert counted with ease. But there was no not realizing that "I won't let you go," because of the intensity of his gaze. Words held a finality that made her breath hitch. He wasn't asking her. He was declaring it. Stella bit her lip, her mind. She was at odds with her heart and knew she should leave to protect herself before it was too late. But Albert looked at her like that, as if she was the only thing in the world that mattered. She felt herself being pulled deeper into his orbit, and she wasn't sure she wanted to escape anymore. She finally whispered after taking a deep breath, and then speaking slowly. Victoria's smile curved Albert's lips now. He murmured, reaching for her hand and lacing his fingers through hers. "I show you just how serious I am." The next morning, Stella woke up to the soft chirping of birds outside her window and the golden hue of the sunrise spilling into her small apartment. But it wasn't the morning light that stirred her awake. It was the buzzing of her phone. Groggily, she reached for it, her eyes widening when she saw Albert's name. Her heart rate sped up as she saw the screen flash, and he was calling her. Already with hesitation, she answered, "Hello, good morning, my Stella." His deep. Her spine shivered as she heard the velvety voice ask, "Did you sleep well?" "I did." She wasn't sure how to navigate this new dynamic between them, the kiss, his confession. It all felt like he had looked at her like she were his entire world. "Surreal good," Albert said smoothly, "because I need you to get ready. I'm picking you up in an hour." Her eyebrows furrowed. "Picking me up for what you'll see," he said, his tone amused. "Something comfortable. I'll be there soon." Before she could argue, he hung up. Stella was baffled by what he was doing exactly an hour later and stared at her phone. Herself seated in the passenger seat of Albert's sleek black Rolls-Royce, her nerves tangled in knots, he had arrived on time. His presence commanding, as ever dressed in a suit that was perfectly tailored and made him appear even more powerful than she did remembered. As the car cruised through the city, she finally turned to him. "Are you going to tell me where we're going?" Albert smirked but didn't take his eyes off the road. "Patience, love, you'll find out soon enough." Her stomach flipped at the casual endearment, but she chose to ignore it, instead focusing on the scenery. Soon the city faded into the background, replaced by vast rolling hills, and a breathtaking estate perched at top a cliffside. Stella's jaw dropped as the car rolled up to the most magnificent villa she had ever seen. It looked like something out of a dream, elegant, grand, yet strangely intimate. She turned to Albert in shock. "What is this place?" He parked the car and turned to face her, his eyes unreadable. "This is my private villa," and soon, he forced her to meet his intense gaze by gently lifting her chin with his fingers. "This will be your home, Stella." Her lips parted in disbelief. "Albert." He silenced her with a look. "And I told you, I want you in my life. Not just for a night. Not just for stolen moments. I want you." He spoke softly for the rest of his life. "I know this is overwhelming, but I need you to comprehend something I've never experienced before. Stella, you are more than just a passing fancy. Woman, I've been waiting for her to stop breathing. Forever she wasn't prepared for this." But as Albert reached for her hand and she felt the strong, steady beat of his heart as she gently pressed it against his chest, she knew one thing for sure. Neither was he, but he wanted her. And as she stared into his, with determination and love in her eyes, she saw something both terrifying and thrilling. Stella's heart was pounding as she stood at the entrance of the Albert's breathtaking villa, her mind swirling with emotions she wasn't ready to name. The grand estate before her was nothing short of mesmerizing, a masterpiece of architecture that reflected both power and ill in the sweeping glass windows, intricate carvings, and large marble pillars. She had no idea what she was getting herself into as she looked out over the endless blue ocean. Yet here she was, being claimed by the man who owned it all. Albert stood beside her, tall frame exuded unwavering confidence, and her hand rested possessively on the small of her back, as if he feared she might run. And perhaps he was right, because Stella wasn't sure if she was ready for this, for him, for the overwhelming force of emotions that consumed her whenever he looked at her. "I built this villa with the hope of sharing it with someone special." Albert's voice was deep, controlled, yet tinged with an emotion she couldn't quite place. His fingers gently traced down her arm, sending a shiver up her spine, until Stella sucked in, "I never thought I'd meet that person." Sharp breath, the intensity in his gaze made it impossible to look away. "Albert," she whispered, "this is too much," her voice barely audible against the crashing waves in the distance. This world of yours, Albert's jaw tightened. He turned her to face him completely, his hands framing her face with an almost desperate tenderness. Don't say that he murmured. You belong with me. I don't care about. His eyes burning into hers. Our disagreements regarding your past or what society thinks of us when you kiss me, Stellar. You changed my world that night, and I can't and won't go back. Back to me, she tried to respond with trembling lips, but he was already there, pulling her inside and leading her through the grand entrance, which was filled with the aroma of freshly cut roses and polished wood. Ceilings, chandeliers that cascaded, opulent velvet furnishings. It was a home fit for royalty, and yet as her feet moved over the marble floors, she felt oddly at ease as if she belonged here. Albert intertwined their fingers, guiding her to a large open terrace where the evening sun bathed the world in a golden glow. A private dinner was set up with candles flickering in the warm breeze, the sound of the ocean waves creating a melody of serenity. You planned this? She asked her. Albert smiled and pulled out a chair for her, in your honor, his voice filled with wonder. Always Stella hesitated for only a moment before taking the seat, watching as he sat across from her, his gaze never once leaving her face. The chef arrived serving an array of gourmet dishes, perfectly seared, steak-roasted vegetables, fresh seafood, all things Stella had never tasted in such an extravagant setting before, but she barely touched her food, not because she wasn't hungry, but because Albert was watching her with a look so intense, so full of desire, that it made her breath hitch every time their eyes met. You make me nervous when you look at me like that. She admitted, her fingers absent-mindedly tracing the edge of her glass. Albert leaned forward, his arms resting on the table, and curled his lips into a steady, devastating smile. Good, he said, because every time I look at you, I lose my damn mind. Her cheeks flushed, her pulse skyrocketing the way he spoke, the way he made her feel no one had ever affected her like this before. And despite the fear of what was happening between them, a part of her didn't want to run anymore after dinner. Albert took her hand once more, leading her to a secluded garden filled with the scent of blooming jasmine. The sky was painted in hues of pink and violet stars beginning to twinkle in the distance. He stopped near a stone bench, turning to her with a look so serious, so full of longing, that she felt rooted to the spot. I need to know something. He said, his fingers brushing against hers. Are you willing to give us a chance? Stella, not just for tonight, not just for stolen moments, but for something real. Her breath caught. He was giving her a choice, a chance to walk away before she fell too deep. But hadn't she already fallen? Hadn't she already surrendered to the way he made her feel? Stella inhaled. Albert looked intently at his face, but there was no sign of uncertainty. Knew what he wanted, and he wanted her. Finally, she reached up, resting her, feeling the warmth of his skin beneath her palm's touch. I'm not sure what the future holds. Albert, she whispered, but I know that when I'm with you, I feel alive. A slow smile spread across his lips, his eyes darkening with something. I only needed to hear that intensely before she could respond. His arms were around her, pulling her against his chest as his lips crashed onto hers with a hunger that stole her breath. The world melted away, leaving only them two souls tangled in a passion so fierce, so consuming, that there was no turning back. And this time Stella didn't want to. The villa was enveloped in darkness, casting a soft, intimate glow over everything. And the waves hummed gently. The cool breeze carried the scent of salt and jasmine through the open terrace doors as song played against the cliffs. Stella stood by the edge of the balcony, her hands gripping the ornate railing as the weight of everything that had happened between her and Albert settled deep in her chest. She could still feel the warmth of his lips, the fire in his touch, the way his voice trembled with when he told her he wanted something that was real and still had a part of her that had always lived in uncertainty, whispered doubts into her mind. Would she only heard the faintest hint of Albert's genuine desire for someone like her behind her? Footsteps, followed by the presence of a familiar warmth, and then a strong arms wrapped around her waist, pulling her against the solid warmth of his chest. She gasped softly, her heart stammering, as Albert buried his face against her hair, inhaling deeply. "You're thinking too much," he murmured, his deep voice sending shivers down her spine. Stella closed her eyes, leaning into his, embraced despite the storm of emotions inside her. "I can't help it," she admittedly. "It appears as though all of this a dream, like something I'll wake up from and realize it wasn't real." Albert twisted her around, covering her face with his hands and forcing her to look at him. His gaze was fixed on something. Firmly, "I need you to understand," he said. "Something fierce, something undeniable, it is real. That's Stella. I've never wanted anything as much as I want you." Her breath hitched, her fingers instinctively clutching his shirt. "But why me?" she said. "You could have anyone. Women would do anything for... Be in my place." His face darkened and his grip tightened as if he feared she might vanish. "Do you think this is about anyone specifically? Do you think I would? If you could be replaced, go to these lengths." His thumb brushed against Stella. "The night you changed me," his reverent touch on her lips. "When you kissed me, you ignited something inside of me, and I've been unable to think since. Straight, I can't breathe without wanting you." Her pulse thundered in her ears, her entire world spinning as he lowered his head, his lips grazing hers in the lightest, most torturous touch you made. He whispered, "I want to claim you and make you mine in," calling me insane. "Every way, but most importantly, I want you to want me back." Stella's heart shook her walls. For so long she had been persuaded by his words that she was safe, that love wasn't meant for her, and that fantasies of men like Albert existed. Not in her reality, but here he was, laying himself bare, showing her that he was more than just an untouchable billionaire. He was her own Courage Rose. She raised her hand, ran her fingers through his hair, and pulled him closer. "I do want you," she said. "That frightens me," Albert moaned, as if those words were against his lips. Shattered something inside of him, and without waiting another second, he crushed her to him, his lips capturing hers in a desperate, searing kiss. It was raw, filled with unspoken promises, with a hunger that spoke of nights he had spent losing sleep over her. Stella melted into him, her hands roaming over his strong shoulders, feeling every inch of the man who had invaded her life, so completely. But just at the time when things started to spiral into something deeper, Albert's breathing became uncontrollable, and he rested his forehead on his hands. Against hers, his grip on her hips almost bruising. "Not here," he rasped, not like. Her eyes flickered with confusion, and her lips remained swollen from his. "Kiss, what do you mean?" Albert exhaled sharply, as if trying to gather control. "I don't want Stella's first night with me to be just about passion. I want it to be everything I want it to be." Pulled away, bringing her hand to his lips and giving him a tender kiss. "Her knuckles, come with me tomorrow." He said, his voice softer now. "Let me take you." She hesitated, but the sincerity in his eyes made it impossible for her to say no. Somewhere special where a small, knowing smile touched his lips. Somewhere that will leave no doubt in your mind that you belong with me. The following day, Stella found herself in. She was twirling her fingers in her lap in the back seat of Albert's sleek black car. As the city blurred past them, she still had no idea where he was taking her. But she was filled with anticipation like a spring. Every time Albert would glance at her, his hand resting over hers, grounding her. Finally, the car slowed to a stop in front of a stunning estate that is surrounded by sprawling gardens with Stella's breath and vibrant roses. Caught as she stepped out, her eyes drinking in the sight of the elegant structure before her, it was nothing like the grand modern villa. Albert owned this place, had an old-world charm, something deeply personal. "Well," she voiced her question. Albert didn't answer right away. Instead, he led her, barely audible. Inside his grip, firm yet gentle, the moment they crossed the threshold, she noticed the warmth of the space. The photographs lining the walls, the subtle nostalgia, and the scent of aged wood. "This was my parents' house." Stella turned to Albert as he finally spoke, his voice unusually soft. The vulnerability in his expression. "They built this place. It is the only home that has ever truly felt like one to me, along with love." A lump formed in Stella's throat. She watched as he walked further in, his fingers grazing over an old piano near the grand staircase when they died. "I stopped coming here," he admitted, because it reminded me too much of what I lost her heart. Eched at his confession, slowly she stepped closer, reaching for, why did he bring me here now? With his hand. To her, his intense gaze, because you remind me of what I did, can still have, he said simply of what love is supposed to feel like. A shaky breath escaped her, Albert. But before she could say more, he dropped to one knee, pulling something from his pocket, a small velvet box. Stella gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. What are you? Albert flipped the box open, revealing a stunning diamond ring that caught the afternoon sunlight, shimmering like the ocean waves. His expression was illegible, but his eyes were red with unmistakable emotion. I know this is going to be quick. He said, I know you probably think I'm insane, but Stella, I don't want to waste another second pretending I can live without you. He took her hand, pressing a kiss to her. Palm, I love you. I want to make you my princess. My wife say, yes, Stella, give me forever. She shed tears, chest tightening with emotions so overwhelming, she thought she might burst. She had never imagined. A moment like she threw herself into his embrace because she had no idea she could be loved so ferociously. Arms whispering the only word that mattered. Yes, Albert caught her, holding her close as he buried his face against her neck, his entire body trembling with relief. You've just made me the happiest man alive, he murmured as the sun bathed them in golden light. Stella knew her life had. Stella's heart raced in her chest as Albert cradled her in his arms and changed her forever. She still felt the lingering warmth of his breath against her skin, like an unbreakable fortress. Electrifying shiver that had cascaded down her spine when he whispered those life-changing words. Marry me, she had said yes, not out of impulse, but because deep down she knew there was. She had no life outside of him. He was the beginning and the end of every waking moment, thought her every whispered dream. But now, as she stood beneath the golden, the truth of what she had just done became clear in the estate's grand hall's light. To sank in, she lifted her gaze to Albert's, searching for any trace of doubt in his deep, stormy eyes. But all she found was certainty. He looked at her as if she was the most precious thing in the world, as if he had just won the most priceless treasure. A slow smile stretched across his lips as he reached for her, trembling, interlacing their fingers and bringing her to his feet. Presence. You have no idea how long I've waited to hear that word from your lips, he murmured, his thumb brushing over her knuckles with a reverence that made her breath hitch. Stella swallowed hard, her emotions swirling inside her like an unstoppable tide. Are you sure about this? Albert, this isn't just the rush of the moment. His expression darkened, and without warning he swept her into his arms, lifting her effortlessly as if she weighed nothing. She gasped, clutching his shoulders as he carried her through the dimly lit corridor, his strides full of determination. The scent of aged wood and roses lingered in the air as he pushed open a heavy oak door, stepping into what seemed to be a master bedroom. However, this wasn't just any bedroom. The room was illuminated by candlelight cast golden hues over the antique fireplace, silk-covered bed, and flickering flames. The tall windows that overlooked the moonlit gardens, a chill ran down Stella's spine. But it wasn't because of fear. Rather, it was because of the sheer intensity of the moment. As he gently pressed her back against the carved wooden post of, Albert set her down, his hands never leaving her body. As he shackled her, his breath was uneven and his eyes were aflame with obsessiveness. Between his body and the bedpost, you think this is just a rush, he rasped, his fingers trailing up her bare arms, leaving a scorching path in their wake. Stella, do you have any idea what you've done to me? He leaned in closer, his lips barely grazing her earlobe, making her shudder from the moment that night, you kissed me, and you became my addiction, obsession, and every single thought. Stella parted her lips, breathing erratic as she clutched at the fabric of his shirt, her knees threatening to give out beneath the weight of his words. She was forced to look into his soul-piercing as Albert cued her face. Eyes, I have everything man could ever want, wealth, power, influence, but none of it doesn't matter. If I didn't have you, I'd burn everything just to keep you by my side. Sighed, his voice was raw, desperate. Tell me you understand. That a tremor ran through Stella as she felt the sheer depth of his love crash into her. How could she have ever doubted him? This wasn't just some fleeting infatuation. This was real. This was for. She whispered as she ran her fingers through his hair. Forever, I think. She pulled him down into a searing, soul-shattering kiss. The moment their lips met, the world ceased to exist. Albert groaned against her mouth, his control. He snapped as he gently lifted her and pressed her back against the cool wall, his lips moving with a desperate hunger, devouring her, claiming her, in a way that sent fire pulsing through her veins. Stella gasped as he intensified the kiss. She tightened her arms around his neck, and their bodies pressed together in an unbreakable bond. Embrace his hands roamed over her back, memorizing every curve, every shiver, every soft moan that escaped her lips. "You're mine," he breathed between kisses. Stella's head trembled as he spoke, his voice thick with need. Spinning at the sheer force of his touch, she whispered, "I'm yours." Fisting in his shirt drew him even closer, and his chest growled contentedly. In one swift motion, he carried her to the bed, laying her down on the silken sheets as he hovered above her. His eyes raked over her with possessiveness, as if he was engraving this moment into his soul. "I will spend every day proving to you just how much you mean to me," he vowed, pressing a soft kiss to her forehead, then her cheek, then the delicate column of her throat. "I will never let you doubt my love." Stella, tears pricked at the corners of her eyes as she raised her hands to cover his face. "You don't have to prove anything," she murmured. "I believe you." A flicker of relief crossed his features before he captured her lips once more, this time with a slow, lingering tenderness that spoke of devotion rather than hunger. The kiss deepened their bodies, pressing together in a tangle of love, passion, and an unbreakable promise. As the night went on, whispered confessions filled the air. Stolen kisses and an undeniable bond that neither of them could ever break. They lay entwined beneath the soft glow of the fireplace. Albert's arms wrapped securely around her as if he would never let her go, as Stella drifted off to sleep, wrapped in the warmth of the man who turned her world upside down. She knew without a doubt that this was only the beginning of the sheer curtains of the forever, let the golden morning sun through. Huge bedroom that gave the lovers a warm glow, tangled in silk sheets. Stella stirred first, her body nestled in Albert's strong arms. She felt his steady rise and fall, like a cocoon of warmth around her. Chest, the rhythmic beating of his heart against her cheek, and for a moment she simply stayed there, savoring the feeling of being his. She let out a soft sigh as her thoughts returned to last night. She recalled the force of Albert's confessions and the reverence he had shown for her, as if she were his most valuable possession. When he claimed her as his forever, the feeling was still there in his eyes of unwavering certainty. Surreal, as though she were ensnared in the most exquisite dream she had ever wanted to wake up from. As if sensing her thoughts, Albert tightened his grip around her, his face buried in the crook of her neck, and his breath warming her. He murmured, "Skin, you're awake," his voice thick with sleep, but also full of undeniable possessiveness. Stella smiled, turning slightly to meet his gaze. "I was just thinking," he lifted an eyebrow, tracing lazy patterns on her bare shoulder, about what she hesitated, biting her lip about how fast everything happened between us. "It seems like just yesterday that I was just a stranger who kissed you drunk, and now that I'm in your arms, engaged to you." She choked hard and turned her head away. "Completely in love with you." Albert's expression darkened with intensity, and in the next second he had her pinned beneath him, his hands framing her face as his piercing gaze burned. "Do you regret entering her space?" His low voice almost dangerous, as if the mere thought of losing her was enough to send him into madness. She shook her head. As soon as she wrapped her hands around his wrist, she said, "Never. I just silenced her with a deep soul." Searing kiss, his lips moving against hers with a mixture of passion and desperation, as if he needed to remind her, to make her feel every ounce of the When he finally released his breath, the love that had consumed him lay ragged on his forehead. Against hers, then don't question it, he rasped his fingers, tangling in her hair. "Don't overthinking is not a sign of weakness. Stella, what we have is real, and the only thing that's ever felt real in my entire life." And when she heard his words, her heart swelled. She cued his face without hesitation, whispering, "I believe you," as a slow smirk tugged at his lips, and he flipped them over, placing her on top of him as he leaned back, before she had time to process what was happening. Against the pillows, good because you're mine now and there's no escaping. As she playfully smacked his chest, her laughter filled the room, but moment was short-lived as a sudden knock on the door shattered their private world. Albert's expression darkened, his possessiveness, flaring "who dares," he growled under his breath, his arms still wrapped around Stella protectively. "Sir, a voice from the other side requesting your presence in the main hall because of an urgent matter, your attention." Albert sighed in irritation, pressing a kiss to Stella's forehead. He ordered, "I'll handle it and come back," before reluctantly getting up and staying here. "To you," she gave a watching nod as he removed his robe and left the room, commanding presence filling the space even as he disappeared through the doors. Stella exhaled, leaning back against the pillows, but an uneasy feeling settled in her chest. Something about the urgency in the butler's voice didn't sit right with her, curious and unable to shake the feeling. She got dressed and went quietly the way Albert had gone, staying in the shadows as she got closer to the grand hall. What she saw made her blood run cold. A stunning woman stood at the center of her emerald green dress, drew a confident grin from her red lips as she walked down the hall, clinging to her body in a way that screamed danger. But it wasn't her beauty. Stella was uneasy because of the way she looked at Albert, as if she had something to say him. "Albert," the woman purred, her voice dripping with familiarity. "Did you really think you could just move on without me?" Albert's jaw tightened, his entire attitude. Mina became icy cold. "What the hell are you doing here?" Stella clenched her heart. Victoria, the name sent a sharp pang through her chest. Was this someone from his past, an ex-lover, a woman he once loved? Victoria took a step closer, her eyes gleaming with amusement. "Oh, darling, don't be surprised, because you already know that I don't give up easily." It was impossible to read Albert's expression, but the tension in his body was evident. "I don't have time for your games, whatever you think we had. It's over," Victoria chuckled, crossing her arm. "Is it because I can see a man who is still as obsessed with me as ever from where I'm standing?" Stella's breath hitched, obsessed. She moved forward without regard for staying before she could stop. Hidden identity, the moment she spoke, Victoria and Albert turned toward her. Victoria's smirk deepened. "Oh, and who might you be?" Albert's expression darkened, but Stella didn't back down when she saw Victoria's gaze. "And I'm Stella, Albert's fiancée." Silence filled the room, then Victoria let out a laugh, slow and mocking. "Fiancé? Oh, Albert, you really don't waste any more time, do you?" She moved closer, her eyes shining with something dangerous. "So tell me, sweetheart, did he tell you how we used to be?" Stella's heart pounded in her chest. She didn't want to know, and she didn't want to doubt Victoria's words. The confidence in her voice made her stomach churn with unease. Albert, however, didn't hesitate. He reached for Stella, pulling her into his arms. "I don't need to explain to you that Stella is mine. Future and nothing you say will change that." Victoria's expression faltered for, "Oh, we'll see about it." She masked it with another smirk for a split second. That she leaned in slightly and spoke softly. "You ought to inquire about what Stella's rigidity in Paris tightened Albert's grip on her and tightened his body." He spoke with enough rigidity to convey his caution and patience. Victoria snapped, "Get out! And don't ever come near Stella again." She just smiled, gave him one last look before stepping back on her heels and leaving the mansion. But what had transpired in Paris lingered in her words. Stella didn't want to doubt Albert. She didn't want to question the man she loved. But as she looked up at him, searching in his stormy eyes for answers, she realized one thing: she required to know the truth. Stella's heart raced as fast as Victoria's. Taunting words echoed in her mind. "Ask him about what happened in Paris," had smirked with confidence, leaving a heavy impression. Stella felt a weight of unease settling in her stomach that she didn't want to doubt. Albert didn't want to let a stranger's words poison the love they had built, but no matter how hard she tried to push it away, the thought refused to leave her. What had happened in Paris, and why hadn't Albert told her about it? Albert's grip on her waist tightened, as if sensing her inner turmoil. His voice, deep and firm, broke through her thoughts. Stella, don't let her get into your head. His blue eyes, usually filled with warmth when he looked at her now, carried a storm raging within them. Victoria thrives on creating doubt. That's what she does. Stella swallowed, meeting his intense gaze. Then explain to me what she meant about Paris, she said softly but firmly. Albert's jaw clenched, and for the first time since she had met him, she saw something she had never seen before. Hesitation. That hesitation sent a sharp pang through her heart. Why was he hesitating in Stella? He exhaled, running a hand through his dark hair. It's not what you think, then. Tell me what to think, she whispered, looking into his eyes for answers, because all I have right now is her. Words in your silence. He stepped back with his hands in the air. As if engaged in an internal struggle, he clenched his fists at his sides, and the tension in the air between them increased. Crackling like a live wire, finally, after what felt like an eternity, he spoke. He acknowledged that Paris was a mistake, speaking lowly but with a raw quality. Prior to meeting Stella, there was a time when I didn't believe in love, when I only saw relationships as transactions. Stella's breath hitched transactions. A glimmer of regret flickered through transactions, Albert's eyes. Victoria was part of that past. She was involved with me in ways that never had any real meaning. She wanted power, prestige, and he stopped exhaling. I abruptly let her believe she had it before moving on because I didn't care until I realized how dangerous she was. Ended, and it wasn't pretty. Stella swallowed his words, which were risky. She is manipulative and obsessed with control. When Albert's gaze hardened. I broke things off. She threatened to ruin me, tried to stir scandals, spread lies, but I had sufficient power to prevent her from causing real harm. This is why she despises me, Stella. I drove her out of Stella, felt a chill down her spine as she safeguarded my life and prevented her from ever again touching my world. The way he spoke about Victoria, there was no lingering affection, no sign of. She took a step, unresolved feelings and only a deep, unwavering contempt. Closer to him, reaching for his hand, and now she's back. Albert's fingers wrapped around hers, immediately under his possessive, protective grip. And she would fail again, he warned. Firmly, because I now possess something that she will never be able to take away from me, he warned. When his thumb touched her cheek, a wave of emotion washed over her. Stella, he had given her his truth, had faced his past, hidden for her. She had no. There is no reason to doubt him or to allow Victoria's shake to shake the foundation. Of what they had, I trust you, she whispered, pressing her forehead against his. I won't let her get between us. Albert let out a deep sigh of relief, and then his lips were on hers, fierce, urgent, claiming he kissed her, as if sealing a promise, as if reaffirming that no past, no shadow could ever change the way he felt about her. But just as Stella melted into him, a sharp sound shattered the moment, her phone ringing reluctantly. She pulled away, reaching for the device. Her brows furrowed when she saw an unknown number flashing across the screen. Albert noticed her hesitation. Who is it? I don't know. That she bit her lip before finally saying hello to an unfamiliar voice in a deep voice. Miss Stella, I think we need to meet. Her breath caught, the speaker said. Who is this person? The man chuckled. Simply put, I have information that you would like to learn more about Victoria. Stella, whose eyes widened, looked at Albert, who was watching her intently. His entire body tensed. What kind of information? A pause. Then meet me at the Blackwood Hotel, Suite 1702. Tonight? Come alone? The line went dead, and Stella slowly lowered her phone. Mind spinning. Who was that, and why did they want to meet her alone? Albert immediately grabbed her wrist, his grip firm, but not harsh. You're not going. His voice was cold, absolute. Stella looked up at him, confusion and curiosity battling within her. But what if he stopped talking to her and turned dangerous? Be a ruse Stella. Victoria has used in the past, and I won't let you enter a trap. But what if it's not a trap? She argued. What if this person has something that could help us? Albert's eyes flashed with frustration. I don't care. Your safety comes first. Stella exhaled, torn. She understood Albert's concerns, but she couldn't shake the feeling that this meeting could be important. I can take care of myself, she said softly. Albert's jaw ticked. I know you can, but you don't have to. Not when you have me. He cued her face, his thumb brushing against her bottom lip. Let me handle this, Stella, please. She bit her lip, her heart wearing with it itself. Should she listen to him? Should she ignore the call and let Albert deal with it? Or should she take the risk? One thing was clear, Victoria was not going to relent, and Stella had to be prepared to face him if she wanted to safeguard her relationship with Albert. Whatever was coming, she took a deep breath, meeting his eyes with unwavering determination. Then we handle it together. Albert's gaze softened slightly before he let out a resigned sigh. God, you're impossible. He pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly. Fine. But we do this my way. A small smile tugged at her lips. Deal. As night fell over the city, the storm that had been brewing for so long. Stella and Albert would be right in the middle of it when it broke. Stella's mind raced in Albert's villa's grand bedroom as the night was full of tension and the outside air was crisp. Racing with thoughts of the enigmatic phone call, the voice of the unknown caller still echoed in her head. Meet me at the Blackwood Hotel, Suite 1702 arrived on her own, and she had no idea who they were or what they had to say. But one thing was certain, it was about Victoria. And if there was any chance of uncovering something that could help them deal with her once and for all, Stella couldn't ignore it. But Albert's reaction had been instant and absolute. He wouldn't allow her to go across the room. Albert stood near the window. His broad shoulders were stiff, his jaw was tight, and his icy blue eyes showed city lights, but the storm brewing inside him was undeniable. He wasn't just angry, he was worried about her, and that realization warmed Stella's soul. Even amidst the chaos, you're not going, Albert said again, his voice low but firm. Stella turned to him, determination shining in her eyes. Albert, I can't just ignore this. What if they have something that can stop Victoria for good? He let out a sharp breath, running a hand through his dark hair in frustration. And what if it's a setup? What if this is exactly what she wants to lure you out away from me so she can hurt you? He turned to her, his expression dark, arc with an intensity that sent shivers down her spine. I won't take that risk, Stella, not with you. Her heart clenched at the depth of emotion in his voice, but she couldn't. She said softly as she stepped closer, back down. I don't want to be reckless, but I also don't want to live in fear. If this is a trap, we'll be prepared for it. If it's true, we gain an advantage. Albert's hands were clenched at the sides and his jaw was ticking. Impossible. The thought of her walking into danger made his blood boil. But at the same time, he was aware that once she set her mind to something, she could not be stopped. That was something brave, and he both admired and detested about her in times like these. Exhaled sharply. Fine, he muttered, but I'm going with you. Stella shook her head. They told me to come alone. Albert's lips curled into a smirk, one that sent a thrill through her, that dangerous knowing smirk. And you think I give a damn about their conditions? Before she could protest, he reached for his phone, dialed a number and said, I need an entire security team stationed around the Blackwood Hotel in 30 minutes, no one in or out without my command. He ended the call before turning back to her, his expression dark with unyielding authority. You'll go in, Stella, but you'll never be alone. Her lips parted, a mixture of frustration and admiration flooding her. She should have known Albert wouldn't back down either. He was just as stubborn as she was, but in a strange way that reassured her. If this was a trap, she wasn't walking into it. Blindly, an hour later, dressed in a sleek black dress and coat, Stella arrived at the Blackwood Hotel. Her heels clicked softly against the marble floors as she made her way through the dimly lit lobby, her heart pounding in anticipation. A discreet glance in the reflection of a nearby glass panel revealed what she already knew. Albert's men were everywhere, blended into the background, watching everything. She wasn't alone. Taking a deep breath, she stepped into the elevator and pressed the button for the 17th floor as the door slid shut. She felt the weight of the moment settle over her. Whatever was waiting for her behind that door could change everything. The elevator chimed and she stepped out into the silent hallway, her heels muffled against the plush carpet. Suite 1702 stood at the end of the corridor, the golden numbers gleaming under the soft lights. For a brief moment, doubt flickered in her mind. Was this really a good idea? But before she could second-guess herself, the door cracked open slightly, as if someone had been expecting her. A deep voice rumbled from inside. "Come in." Stella hesitated, then pushed the door open and stepped inside. The room was dimly lit, the curtains drawn, casting shadows along the walls. The dim light partially obscured the man's face as he sat in an armchair near the window. In the lighting, he appeared to be older, possibly in his late 40s, with sharp, calculating eyes that studied her closely. "Stella Monroe," he said, leaning back in his chair. "You're braver than I expected." She kept her expression neutral. "Who are you?" the man smirked. "Let's just say I know Victoria better than most." Something in the way he said it sent a chill down her spine. "And why did you want to meet me?" He leaned forward, his expression now serious. "Because I have evidence that Victoria is not just after Albert. She's after you." Stella's breath caught what the man reached into a folder on the table. Pulling out a series of photographs, he slid them across to her. "She's been watching you for weeks, following you, studying you, and from what I've gathered, she's planning something big." Stella's fingers trembled slightly as she picked up the photos. They were grainy, taken from a distance. But there was no mistaking the subject are in different places, leaving Albert's office, shopping, even at their private villa. Her stomach twisted. She, the man, sighed because she doesn't just want Albert back. She wants revenge, and she sees you as the reason she lost everything. A chill ran through Stella's veins. This wasn't just jealousy. This was, she raised her head to the man and asked, "Why are you telling me?" His lips curled into a bitter smile. "As a result of my having done he exhaled. "I made the mistake of trusting Victoria, and I lost everything." Stella's mind spun, and this changed. "Consider this my way of ensuring that someone else does not suffer the same fate. Everything Victoria wasn't just a lingering shadow from Albert's past. She was a threat, a real one." "I need to get back," Stella said, rising to her feet. She needed to tell Albert. The man nodded. "Be careful, Miss Monroe. She's more dangerous than you think." Stella didn't waste another second. She hurried out of the room, her heart pounding. As she stepped into the elevator, she pulled out her phone, dialing Albert. The moment he answered, she whispered, "We have a problem." When she got to the lobby, Albert was already there, ready to greet her. He immediately focused on her with his icy blue eyes, looking for any indication of distress. But when she handed him the photos, his expression turned murderous. "She's been watching you." His voice was lethal. His hands. Stella nodded as she clenched her fists. "She is planning something for Albert, and it's not just about you anymore. It's about me." Albert didn't hesitate. He pulled her. Close, his voice firm and unwavering. Then she just made the biggest mistake of her life. His grip tightened around her, his warmly supporting her, despite Victoria's plans. They would face it. Together, as Albert paced through his grand villa, the air was thick with tension. His office, his jaw clenched, his fingers clinging to the desk's edges. Photographs that Stella had shown him were spread out in front of him, each one a reminder of the ill obsession Victoria had matured into a battlefield of fury and strategy in his mind. She had been watching Stella, stalking her, planning something, and that was a direct attack. Stella sat on the leather couch with her arms around him across the room herself, the revelation's weight settling into her bones, even though she knew Victoria was still lurking in the background. But she had no idea she had been so intent on harm as she had. She was more than just a threat to Albert. She watched and studied her like a prey. Albert stopped pacing and turned to Victoria, if Victoria still wanted to destroy her. His piercing blue eyes burning with a possessiveness that sent shivers down her spine. He walked over and crouched before her, taking her hands in his. "Stella, listen to me. You are not alone in this. I will never let her lay a finger on you." His voice was low, full of unwavering determination. Stella met his gaze, seeing the storm of emotions swirling within him, anger, protectiveness, and something deeper. Something primal. "Albert, what if she doesn't stop? What if she won't get the chance?" He interrupted, his voice sharp. "I will end this before she even tries." Before she could say another word, Albert's phone buzzed on the desk. He stood and grabbed it, his eyes narrowing as he read the message. His body tensed. It was from an unknown number. "If you want Stella safe, come alone midnight. Harbor Pier. Albert's grip on the phone tightened, his entire body going rigid. It was Victoria. Stella saw the change in his expression and stood immediately. "What is it?" Albert turned to her, his face unreadable, but Stella knew him too well. "Something was wrong. She wants to meet." He finally said, his voice like steel alone. A chill ran down Stella's spine. "It's a trap." Albert smirked, a dark, dangerous smirk that sent a thrill through her. Naturally, her heart was pounding. "So you can't go." He moved toward her, powerful presence overwhelming. "I have to. If she wants a game, I'll play, but she doesn't realize." I never lose." Stella grabbed his wrist, her eyes pleading. "Albert, don't do this. She's unhinged. She could." He silenced her with a sudden kiss, his lips crushing against hers with a fiery desperation that stole. His hands got tangled in her hair and pulled her closer, as if he could take her breath away. Imprint his love onto her soul. When he finally pulled back, his forehead rested against hers. "Trust me," he whispered. Tears burned in Stella's eyes, widened. But she knew inside that Albert wasn't going to let her go. A man who backed down at exactly midnight, Albert arrived at the desolate. The chilly wind bit Harbor Pier as the waves crashed against the wooden planks. Against his skin, but he didn't even notice because his mind was on one thing. Ending this, a sleek black sea pulled up a few feet away, its headlights cutting through the darkness. The door opened and Victoria stepped out. She was dressed in her lips were painted red, and her eyes sparkled with a twisted sense of victory. "Albert," she purred as she stepped forward. "You came, Albert. Move, what do you want?" "Victoria," she tilted her head, feigning innocence. "Why, we were once something beautiful, but now we were nothing." So hostile that Albert clenched his jaw. Before she smirked, "Oh, Albert, always so." Her eyes flashed with rage for a brief moment. "Cold, but you weren't always like this. Before she came, you were different." Albert's muscles are tense in the image, and if you touch Stella, I will force you to regret every breath you take. Victoria laughed quietly at you. "Think you can scare me?" She took another step forward, her heels clicking against Albert. "The wood. I no longer care about you. I care about destroying her." Albert's blood ran ice cold. "You won't get the chance." Victoria smirked and raised her hand. Suddenly, two masked men appeared from the shadows. Albert's fists clenched, so this was her plan. But she had underestimated him before the men could make a move. AOW, loud gunshot echoed through the night. One of Victoria's men collapsed. The second barely had time to react before another shot rang out, and he dropped to the ground. Albert didn't even flinch. He simply grinned. "Did you really think I'd come by myself?" Victoria's eyes widened in. She struggled to regain her confidence as Albert's men emerged from the darkness, guns pointed at her. "Shattering you," she whispered. "You set me up." And Albert stepped forward. Towering presence suffocating. "No, Victoria. You set yourself up." His voice was lethal's, every word so decisive that it's out of Victoria's hands. She turned to flee, but Albert's men prevented her from doing so. Were quicker, and they had her restrained in a matter of seconds, preventing her screams from echoing throughout the night. Albert exhaled his fury. When he got back to the villa, it was done, simmering below the surface. Stella was waiting. As soon as he entered, she ran to him and wrapped her arms around his neck, crying. "Cheeks, you're okay," she whispered. Albert held her tight, burying his face in her. "I told you, hair, that nothing can ever separate me from you." She pulled back, cupping. He scanned his face to see if she was there. Albert nodded, and Stella was gone. "Can't hurt you anymore." A sob of relief escaped her, and Albert wasted no time claiming her lips in a fierce, possessive kiss. This time there was no hesitation, no fear, just them. And as Albert carried her to their bedroom, his hands roaming Stella, his lips never left hers, and he whispered to her, "You are mine." Forever, the golden morning sun filtered through the curtains of Albert's luxurious villa, casting a soft, warm glow over the elegantly designed bedroom, where Stella lay in Albert's arms, his. He held her close as if he never wanted to, his bare chest rising and falling steadily around her powerful frame. Let go, the events of the past were now nothing but shadows in their past. Stella's love was no longer threatened by Victoria's absence. Her fingers traced delicate patterns on Albert as they got even closer to the warmth of the skin, feeling the steady rhythm of his heartbeat beneath her touch. A peaceful sigh escaped her lips as she tilted her head up to look at him, her heart swelling with an overwhelming sense of love and security. Albert shook, and his deep blue eyes flung open, securing hers with an intensity that made her breath hitch. His hand came up fingers, brushing a stray lock of hair from her face. "Good morning, my love," he murmured, his voice deep and husky from sleep. Stella smiled, her brown skin glowing in the soft sunlight. "Good morning, my husband-to-be," she whispered, her heart skipping a beat as she spoke the words. They had already spoken about marriage, and now that the storm had passed, there was nothing holding them back. Albert's eyes darkened with something deeper. Love, passion, devotion. He lifted himself up slightly, hovering over her, his fingers tracing the delicate curves of her face. "You have no idea how much I love hearing that," he said, as he brushed her lips in a slow, deliberate kiss that warmed her, spreading throughout her body. "Stella, you are everything to me, and today I want to make it official. Be my wife." Stella's eyes widened in shock, her lips parting slightly as she gasped. "Albert, are you serious?" she whispered. Albert reached under his pillow and pulled out a velvet box, flipped it, and her heart was pounding wildly. Open, revealing a stunning diamond ring that sparkled brilliantly in the sunlight. "I've never been more serious about anything in my life," he said. "I don't want to wait anymore. I want you to be mine forever. Stella, marry me today." Tears welled in Stella's eyes, and without hesitation, she nodded, unable to contain the overwhelming emotions flooding her chest. "Yes," she cried, throwing her arms around his neck as she exhaled with joyous laughter. "Yes, Albert, 1,000 times," crushed her lips in a passionate kiss, his hands gripping her waist as he deepened the embrace, pouring all his love into that one moment when they finally pulled apart. Their foreheads rested together, both of them, breathless but smiling. "I'll make today perfect for you," Albert promised, pressing a kiss to her. "Temple, you'll have everything you've ever dreamed of." And he did. Within hours, Albert had made the garden of his villa a stunning location for a wedding. Was adorned with sparkling fairy lights and a stunning archway made of fresh roses, where they would exchange vows. Stella, dressed in a flowing white gown that hugged her curves beautifully, stood before Albert, her hands trembling slightly as he gazed at her with pure adoration as they exchanged vows. "Stella, felt her heart soar from the moment I met you. You changed my life," she said in an emotional voice. "You showed me a love I never knew existed, and I promise to stand by your side always." Albert's eyes shone with deep devotion as he took her hands in. "His love for Stella is my world, and I make a promise to love and safeguard you every day for the rest of my life." With that, he placed the ring on her finger and gave her a stunning kiss in front of their small group of closest friends. They were now officially husband and wife, and their friends and family erupted in cheers. Wife. That night, Albert carried Stella over the threshold of their honeymoon suite, his eyes filled with burning desire. He placed her gently on the bed, his fingers tracing the delicate lace of her gown. "You're mine, Stella," he murmured against her lips. Forever, their wedding. Against her lips, forever, their wedding night was nothing short of magic, filled with passion, whispered confessions of love, and tender. Albert stroked Stella's stomach as they lay tangled in each other's arms, his thoughts lingering in his mind one day. "I want to have a baby with," he said, "you," softly, pressing his lips against her forehead. Stella smiled, her fingers crossed. Lacing with his, "Then let's make that dream come true," she whispered. Pressing a soft kiss to Stella's love only intensified one morning as the months passed. Her heart raced as she stood in their bathroom and stared at the small test in her hands. She clutched the pregnancy test to her chest and shed tears as she saw the positive result. Pregnant, overwhelmed with joy, she rushed out of the bathroom, running straight into Albert's arms. "Albert," she gasped, "we're going to have a baby," her eyes shining. Albert froze, his breath caught in. He asked Stella, "Are you serious?" down his throat. His voice barely above a whisper. She nodded, placing his hand on her stomach. "Yes, Albert, we're going to be parents." A wave of pure happiness crashed over him, and before Stella could say another word, Albert lifted her into his arms, spinning her around with joyous laughter. "My love," he whispered, pressing a reverent kiss to her lips. "You've just made me the happiest man alive." Months flew by, and Albert was the most devoted husband and soon-to-be father. He attended every doctor's appointment, massaged Stella's swollen every night, kissed their unborn child on the feet, and when the day finally came, Stella held. When she held their newborn daughter for the first time, she wept with joy. Her cheeks, Albert sat beside her, his eyes filled with awe as he gazed at the tiny life they had created. "She's perfect," he murmured, stroking the baby's soft cheek. Stella smiled, pressing a kiss to their daughter. "Has your eyes on her forehead?" she whispered. Albert pulled Stella into his arms, holding both his wife and daughter close. "Our love gave us this miracle," he said softly, "and I promise to cherish and protect both of you for the rest of my life." Estella rested against him, their baby cradled between them. She knew without a doubt that this was her happily ever after. Albert had been a stranger the night she drunkenly kissed him, but now he was her forever.